Okay, we're now working on the Excel case number 1A, the first part of Maxie's Grocery Mart. On the first page, it talks about, under design specifications, that all 4 pages need the current date, where current date here appears on your starter file. This may be something you're not very familiar with, so let me show you the quick and easy way to do this. I select the cell. All I'm going to type is equal now, open and close parentheses, and it will always show the current date. So if I open this spreadsheet on January the 20th, it will show January 20th on there. Step 2 under design specifications, it mentions that you need to make sure you add a function to calculate the total recurring benefits. If you just copy the value from cell B6, that's not going to be right. You need to use a function. You'll also notice that the formatting on these is accounting. If you format those cells as currency, the dollar sign appears just directly to the left of the amount. But if you pick accounting, the dollar sign shows at the far left side of the cell, and that's what it wants you to do. And also, it talks about range names. In this case, it's just a single cell, and I want to call it something short. I'm just going to call it total bennies. If you choose to use a longer name, it tells you here that you need to use underscores to separate the parts of the name. Also, when you start naming ranges, if you find you made a mistake or you want to change something, if you go to do a question mark to get help about range names, it will direct you to the Formulas tab, Name Manager. It will show you, in this case, in this workbook, I have total bennies, total costs, total one time. If I find that there's any here that I want to edit, I can change that. Call it total once only. I can change that name, and now that's changed, or I can delete a range name that I don't like or create a new one here. So we are now ready to input our formulas, and you'll see that the reference is made here on page 2 of the instructions. You've moved on step 4 to the Economic Feasibility Summary Worksheet, and that directs you to a couple of places. First of all, that first document that talks about Excel case number 1, Maxie's Grocery Mart. On page 4 of those instructions, it has an example of what your Economic Feasibility Worksheet should look like when you get finished. But also, it talks about some of the information and where it's coming from. In addition, the directions for Excel Case 1A, Maxie's Grocery Mart Part 1, has on the last page a list of information about the formulas you're going to be using. So we're going to be switching back and forth between those. The directions tell us that benefits for year 0 are going to be 0, so we're going to type in a 0. Then under here, for the following years, for years 1 through 5, we are going to put in the recurring benefits. I called mine total bennies. Hit enter, and then I can copy that across. Now here's where the magic of using Excel really helps us out. We're told that the present value factor, page 3 of that main document that covers all of Maxie's Grocery Mart information, says that our present value calculation is 1 divided by 1 plus I raised to the n power. Well, I is the interest rate. In this case, it's our discount rate of 10%. N is the number of years, and in this case, for this column, it's going to be 1. So here in cell C11, I'm going to type equal 1 divided by, open parentheses, 1 plus interest rate, which is in the cell, absolute, because that's not going to change. Close our parentheses, raised to, which is that caret or the shifted 6, the number of years, which is in this cell. Enter. You should get 0.909. I'm going to make one little change to this before I copy it, because you'll notice that we're also going to use the present value factor down here on row 18. So if I make this, instead of all relative, if I make it both column and row absolute, then as I copy it over, it's not going to change. That's not what I want. I want the column to change. I want the row to remain absolute. So there we go. If I hit F4 twice, now if I copy this over, I should get the correct calculations. You can double check your amounts to make sure everything's right. Also, I can copy from this, all of these, I'm going to copy these. The present value factor is going to be the same down here on row 18. And when I copy that with my combination of absolute and relative addresses, I get exactly the same dollar amounts, or the same percentages. That's what I want. So I've got that part done. Present value of benefits, it tells me on my formula sheet, it's the present value factor times benefits. So it's going to be equal to my present value factor times benefits, which is in that cell. If I do that formula, then I can copy that value over. You can double check your amounts, make sure it's working correctly. Net present value of all benefits, that's equal to the net present value of benefits from the previous year, in that case it's here, plus the present value of benefits from the current year, here. And since it was 0 in year 0, and again, you can double check your dollar amounts to make sure things are correct. I already used my name range to input the one-time cost there, and I put 0 in years 1 through 5. On the recurring costs, I put 0 in year 0, and now I want to, and it tells you to put these in as a minus, so if you do equal minus total costs. That's what I called my recurring costs, and again I can copy that over. And it tells me here that the present value of recurring costs is going to be equal to the present value factor here times recurring costs. In this case it happens to be 0, but as I copy that over, you're going to see the dollar amounts filled in. And then the net present value of all costs is equal to previous year plus recurring costs and those lovely one-time costs. So it's going to be the total of this plus any value here for this column. For the next column, it's going to be last year's total plus this year's total, and then I can copy that formula over. So if those were a little complicated for you, these next couple are pretty straightforward. We go back up, it says the total column for net present value of all benefits is supposed to be equal to the value that you have in year 5. So I'm going to say equal the value here. And then same idea for net present value of all costs is equal to the value in year 5, the cumulative total. And I also want the total column, the overall net present value. This row is equal to net present value of all benefits plus, since we input the costs as minuses, we're going to add these, and the difference is going to be the $77,639.13. Let's bold this so that it looks exactly the way the example does. So under the yearly net present value cash flow, it mentions that you can talk about in column 0 or the year 0, just refer to the one-time cost, but don't forget to make this a minus or a negative. The other columns, the years 1 through 5, you're going to do a formula. It's the present value of benefits plus the present value of recurring costs, making sure that you pick the year's total only, and then copy that across. Then for the overall net present value cash flow, this is going to be a running total like you did the total for net present value of all benefits and costs above. And the last formula, the project estimated yearly profit, is again pretty straightforward. It's benefits plus one-time costs plus recurring costs. So you should be able to calculate that formula and copy it across. So now we are ready to protect and lock this economic feasibility summary so that nobody accidentally makes changes. So the one cell that we want Mr. Ferrante to be able to change is B5. So if I go to B5, I go to the Review tab, I click on Protect Worksheet. I have selected the unlocked cells. So this is the one cell that I want unlocked. And I tell it a password to protect the sheet. You're going to pick your own password, and then you re-enter to make sure you typed it correctly. Okay, now, if I want to play with this, I can enter a new percentage. So instead of 10%, maybe I want 25%. And it's going to allow me to change this value. It will change all the values in the rest of the worksheet because I've done my formulas correctly, and go back and forth. So the directions give you a pretty good idea of how you can do this more efficiently and effectively, but you're going to be copying from the other worksheet, which you've done before in the tutorial. So I just wanted to remind you that when you see all of these pound signs, remember what that means. It means that the value is too large for the field size. So if I just select that row of columns or those columns and double click, it will make it all fit and show very nice. Now it wants you to simply insert a line chart. So if I select that range, insert a line chart, you'll see where the break-even point is. You're going to move it over, make it bigger, and change the title, and that should be finished for you. The only thing left to do is to rename this economic feasibility summary sheet to the new EFS base case 10%. Make 2 copies, one for 5% and one for 15% discount rate. And if when you do that, your 15% should look like the picture shown on page 6. Page 6, item 9, you're ready to rename and move your sheets around as appropriately. And then you need to write a memo, and you'll find a format and an example of how that might read, address what's going on here, and what your recommendation would be to Mr. Ferrante. That's it for this assignment.